you never quite know when you make something how it's going to be received. With this script, when it came through, I think all of us involved knew that it was special. It was unusual to read something that had this depth of character in it and this huge, epic, sweeping story that's underpinned by these very intimate, domestic, very precisely drawn moments. So there was definitely a sense that it was special, but to have had the reception that we've had is definitely beyond what any of us expected.
Why did you say yes to this particular role?
It was actually an incredibly easy one. I'd been reading lots of scripts at that time and hadn't come across anything that was really making an impact. And then The Brutalist came through, and I thought initially, what an amazing title, such a brilliant film title. And then in reading it, I was incredibly moved by it, fundamentally. And I felt that Erzsébet was this magnificent character. She was someone who is completely unafraid of who she is. When we meet her, you realise she's been through incredible trauma. She's been through concentration camps alongside her husband in different camps, but they've been through very similar experiences. And I felt there was a great challenge in conveying this woman's experience.
She's incredibly accomplished. I do particularly like the line where, "Did you not tell them anything about me?" I think that could have only been written by a woman. She's also physically weak and malnourished. You get to learn actually that she's exceptionally strong throughout the film. And you mentioned the trauma there, because there's trauma of the Second World War, but she actually has trauma within her body. Mm-hmm. How did you prepare for that?
Well, that was a huge aspect of understanding who she was. And as you say, the experiences that she's gone through are manifesting physically, the malnutrition, the psychological impact. And we see Erzsébet throughout that second half of the film dealing with that. And you realise what's great about the script was that it never pinpoints anything. It never patronizes the audience. So much is conveyed just through performance, which is obviously a delight for an actor. And you realize that in some ways, Erzsébet is she's disassociating from her physical self in some aspects as a way of dealing with the trauma that she's gone through. And in that scene that we just heard, you can see how she is getting the measure of Van Buren. She's incredibly, she has great intuition. I think she has a very low estimation of human nature from what she's been through. Mm. So her expectations of anyone are pretty down there. So she's in that moment, she's reading, what is the impact of this man going to be on their lives? And I think very early on she realizes that he's not a good person. He's a dodgy one.
Yeah, she's very smart. She's sussed him out, hasn't she? And it's the beginning of Adrian Brody's character has escaped the Second World War. He's come to America. It's the immigration story. It's a film in two halves. You've got an hour and a half, and then there's a break, an interval, and then you get the second half where your character turns up. So you've got the huge backdrop, the big immigrant story, but then you've got the intimacy of their relationship, this husband and wife who are being reunited after all this trauma. And it's complicated, and it's a really longed-for reunion. What's the effect? Describe the effect that she has, first of all, on the people around her. And then I want to talk about one scene as well when they're lying in bed together. But first of all, the effect on the people around her.
Well, she has, you're waiting for her arrival, like Laszlo and like the people that he's with, like Van Buren. So the expectations are very high. And you realise that she has quite a force within her. You know, I've been thinking of her as a bit like a Jedi. She has this...
She's handy because you're in Star Wars.
Which, you know, there is some sense of continuity. I'm bringing Jyn Erso with me in some ways through her. And she's pretty unafraid, and she's pretty defiant. And she's not going to conform to expectations. You know, in many ways, Van Buren thinks because he's wealthy, because he has this sense of authority that he thinks comes from that, and she refuses to let him have it. She is there's a scene at the end of the film where she tells him exactly how it is, and that actually, how dare he? He has a line where he says, "If you'll excuse me," he has this pretension to civility, and she absolutely refuses to condone his behaviour, and actually has far more integrity and honesty and truth than he could ever dream of.
What's the difference between performing a completely fictional character like Erzsébet? Although, by the way, like so many people, I thought this was based on a real life story. By the end, I was thinking, is this a real story? Because there's so much depth and complexity. It feels like they are real people. And playing Jane Wilde Hawking and Ruth Bader Ginsburg.
Yeah, I seem to be attracted to these ferocious characters and these women who, I guess, they're pushing. There's a struggle inside of them, and part of that struggle is coming from operating in a patriarchal society. And how do they navigate and find their way in these worlds? But I definitely like I don't know why, but I like a character with a bit of fight in them.
Come on, why?
What's the
what's the appeal?
I think there's always something about, and it's the kind of films I like as well. There's something about the underdog that I really like to get my teeth into.
Is there fighting?
Someone who's pushing against. I think definitely. I think in a lot of women. I think it is. I think there is, particularly when you have strong beliefs, then you have to be tough and you have to push.